In this video, we're going to edit a demo simulation in the all-new Adobe Captivate 13. I'm Paul Wilson, and I make videos about e-learning. If you enjoy what I'm doing here today, by all means like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with all of your e-learning colleagues. I realized that shortly after Adobe Captivate 13 came out that there have been significant changes in the simulation process for Adobe Captivate. So while I've essentially made this video before, I'm updating it for the all-new Adobe Captivate. For today, what we're going to look at is editing a demo simulation. Let's get started. If you're curious how to get to this point here where you have the demo recording, take a look at this video here. I'll put a link in the video and of course in the description as well. So let's start with editing the resulting video that came from that recording process. First things first, I like to open up the Visual Properties Inspector so that I can see the options for not only the slide, but the individual objects as I select them as well. Another thing I recommend that you do when working with a demo simulation is to open up the timeline as well. And then you can clearly see what objects make up this slide. Sometimes it can be a bit confusing when you have the actual screenshot in the background, but ultimately if you turn off the image, it becomes very clear what these objects are. We have some instructions, and you can see that in the components here. We have the mouse pointer itself, and I'll just move that temporarily. And we also have a highlight box, and any of these objects can be turned on or off as you see fit. The one difference is that if you look at a slide that also contains typing text, there will be an extra component that you can turn on or off for that. But we'll get to that in a few moments. Let's take a look at slide 1 again, and I'll turn that background image on for right now. Now, the assumption I'm making here is that you're going to provide some instructions on screen, but you're also going to do some audio narration. And what's great about the all-new Adobe Captivate version 13 is that you have the ability to use some AI voices that are very appropriate for this type of training. Let's start off with our instructions box and type in the instructions for this first action. In other words, this first slide in the demo simulation. So the instructions here will be, and let's just move this a little bit. Select the flights icon to get started. Okay, we can resize this instruction item and literally place it anywhere we wish on the slide. I'm going to just go here. The only thing I'm wishing for from Adobe at some point is the ability to perhaps right-click on this and select alignment options as well, because to center this on the slide, I guess I could use the mathematical ability to figure out how wide it needs to be, what the X and Y coordinates are, and so forth. Interesting side note is that you now have the ability to rotate objects like this. So if you wanted to put your instructions on a slight angle, you certainly could do that, but I'm not going to do that here today. One of the best practices that I use is I like to highlight any object within the instruction that is literally on the slide. So for example, this flights icon, I'm going to double click on the word flights and I'm going to press Control B on my keyboard to make that bold so it's very clear what I'm instructing learners to do. Let's just resize this a little bit, get it down to one sentence or one line of text, and we'll place that approximately in the middle of the slide. So that takes care of the instructions. If I want to turn this into narration, I can double click on the instructions themselves, press Control C, and then click on the slide in question in the slide sorter to ensure that nothing else is selected. Move over to the audio icon in the right-hand toolbar, and under Import, you have the ability to generate text-to-speech. Now this opens up the closed captions window, and I can literally paste in that text into this field right here. I can choose a different voice than the default, which I'll do. Click on More Voices, and we can find a narrator who's going to be appropriate for this simulation. You can do this by choosing the language that you're looking for, perhaps the accent. Let's choose American. Maybe we want a female speaker. The tone could be calm, casual, anything like that. I would say confident is probably a good choice here. And that narrows it down enough. We can probably just select Cassidy, for example, and she will be our voice for this particular slide here. We'll click on Apply, and I can now click on Generate Audio. We can test this out by pressing the play button here.
Select the flights icon to get started.
If you're satisfied with that, we can close the Closed Captions panel and return to the regular slide. To help you lay out the actions that will occur on the slide, I like to click on the little swivel caret icon and underneath the simulation slide 1 so that I can see the audio visually on the slide. My best practice here is that I like to have the narrator speak what's actually going to be performed action-wise and then have those actions occur on screen. So I will typically click on my timeline right at the end of where the audio finishes. And for things like the mouse movement, I'm going to press Control L on my keyboard to have that mouse movement only start once the audio narration is done. For things like instructions, I can select that and press Control E to extend the instructions appearance for the rest of the slide. And for the highlight box, you can choose either to extend it or you can even adjust it so that it only shows up maybe once someone says flights icon. So we could test that out here. Let's try play that again.
Select the flights icon.
Might be hard to do in this case. It's a very fast speaker, but let's just line it up there. You can also shorten this down a little bit too. If you don't feel that the mouse movement is fast enough, we can shorten that on the timeline there. Let's click stop and then click on play and see how that looks.
Select the flights icon to get started.
Okay, so now let's fix a couple of things. The highlight box, first of all, I'd like to cover it the entire flights icon, like so. I like the idea of that we can now add rounded corners to any of our highlight boxes or instruction items, but you can choose to make it pure rectangle if you wish. Incidentally, you do have a geometry option when you select these items, and you can choose things like a rectangle, a triangle, a circle, or a star. And when it comes to instructions, you can choose a rectangle, circle, word balloon, or thought balloon as well. So whatever you want that fits with the instructions that you're performing here. Lastly, I'm going to click on the mouse icon here. As a best practice, I'm designing this for desktop training, so I'm going to choose a mouse that not only will contrast the background well, choose something large so it's easy for people to see. I'm going to choose to animate on click, which will allow me to select the size of the animation and a color choice as well. Something again that will contrast from the background well. Perhaps this light green would be a good choice here. So let's put that mouse cursor so that it's clicking on the actual icon. And another thing you can do, Captivate's default is to do these curvy mouse paths. It's not everyone's favorite thing. So you can actually turn on straighten mouse path and it will go directly to, from where it starts to the icon in question here. While here, I can apply those changes to my mouse settings to all the slides in question, and that will save me having to do these steps on another slide. I'm going to click on the slide in the slide sorter here and just return back to where I can select components. There's one component I'm going to need in this case. And as you can see, some personal information of mine is showing up on screen. So I'm going to choose a blur area, and that's a new feature in the all new Adobe Captivate 13. And I can create this blur effect. We can turn off the border and perhaps choose a different shape, but I think in this case a rectangle's fine. And then I can move this to blur out the content that we're revealing here that I don't want to necessarily share with the entire audience there. So I think this slide is pretty good to go. We can repeat that on other slides here. So let's take a look at this slide here. And the instructions we're going to give here are select the going to field. Sometimes people tend to make these instructions or narrations unnecessarily long-winded. You don't have to do that. Remember, this is a single action in a series of 20 or 30 actions that are occurring here. I'm going to press Control C on my keyboard to copy that text, and I'll click on the slide in the slide sorter, and we'll select my audio icon, click Import, and generate text to speech. I don't need to find Cassidy again. That voice will be showing up under recently used, so I can select Cassidy here. And for the text itself, I can paste that in, and we'll go ahead and we'll generate that audio. So if I play this back,
Select the going to field.
it's not really clear that going to is a field. It reads it like going to is just simply part of the sentence here. So one thing you can do with the AI voices is that you can put that element in quotation marks, and that's going to change the way the narrator speaks that. So let's try updating that audio, and we'll play that back.
Select the going to field.
That sounds more natural. So we'll go ahead and we'll close the closed captions here. Again, we'll open up our slide so that we can see the audio. And the actions of moving our mouse will occur only after that audio has occurred. We'll also adjust our highlight box here so that it's appropriately sized for the going to field. I think in this case it really works that it's a rounded corner like that. And we can again do this so that the highlight box appears the same time that the mouse movement occurs. Again, if you need it a little shorter, just so that the simulation is a little faster, you certainly can do that as well. This looks pretty good. I'm going to bold out the words going to because that's the field we're looking for. And like before, I'll click on the slide itself to return to the components selection, and we'll add a blur area that we can then place over top of my personal information. And we'll position that appropriately up here. Now this slide looks good. So these two are very similar slides. On slide 3, we're going to actually ask people to start typing. So we have some typing text here. There's really nothing you can do. Even if you select it, it doesn't change the properties inspector. There's nothing you can modify. Hopefully you captured it correctly during the recording process. The other part of it is our mouse movement. There's not really much movement here. If you're concerned about the mouse moving while we're typing something in here, you could delete that, but you don't actually have to do that. By default, though, there is no instructions. So I'm going to add some instructions, and you can do that just by selecting your slide and clicking on the checkbox for instructions. Incidentally, any of the components in software simulation that have a plus next to it means that you can add an additional item for that particular thing. So in this case here, if I wanted additional instruction boxes, I could do so. Same thing with highlight boxes, blur area, input fields, buttons, but of course click boxes you can add. Mouse pointers, there's only really one allowed per slide and one typing text per slide. Let's go ahead and put our instructions in here. Type in the first couple of letters for Las Vegas. And we'll just resize that so it covers all of the text there. I'm going to copy this text. And we'll click on our slide and we'll go to the audio section and once again generate text to speech. We'll use Cassidy once again. And the narration goes in the closed captions field there. And I'm going to add something here. I don't need to include it in the instructions, but I just want to point out that you can click on the Add New Caption icon, and we'll just say, in this case, we will type in LAS. Don't know if I need the spaces here, but we'll try that and see how it sounds. Cassidy is already selected. Generate audio. And notice that the duration of these captions adjust once it's generated the audio. Let's play it back and hear and see how it looks.
Type in the first couple of letters for Las Vegas. In this case, we will type in LAS.
Perfect. So I'm going to close the closed caption window. We'll open up the slide duration there. And I'm going to have the typing text occur after the audio has occurred. As far as the mouse is concerned, we could simply just sort of stretch it out across the whole slide. It shouldn't move very much in this case, but that should work well. One of the other things that you can add to any of your simulation slides, and we'll click this here, is that you can add a button. And I like to do this towards the end of a simulation or at the very last slide. And that button will be return to the e-learning or exit the course or something like that. And the action for it could simply be to go to the next slide, or it could be to jump to a different slide somewhere else in the e-learning course. So I think we've done enough of this demo simulation to get a sense of how it's going to work. Let's do a preview and take a look.
Select the flights icon to get started. Select the Going To field. Type in the first couple of letters for Las Vegas. In this case, we will type in LAS.
Okay, and of course now we have our exit button and we could continue with the rest of the e-learning course. But in actuality, what you'll need to do at this point is return to the editing of this demo simulation and make similar changes to all of the slides from this point. 20-something slides later, you'll have this complete, and you can literally copy all of these slides. You can press Control-A to select them all, Control-C to copy them, and then return to either one of your other simulations that you've recorded or to the main e-learning course and paste these slides in.
If you thought this video was helpful, please like and share it with your colleagues. If you need help with Adobe Captivate, hire Paul for one-on-one instruction. Paul's goal is to focus on lessons based on your specific needs. Visit his website at captivateteacher.com. And don't forget to subscribe to his YouTube channel.